Right, so once again it seems what Keir Starmer wants, Keir Starmer seems set to get, as the topic of TV debates once more comes up, as it does every general election, and yet again it appears that instead of meeting the needs of democracy, of giving people across the country the most informed picture they can, the television media are instead more worried about making sure they meet the diva-like requirements of the political leaders to ensure they actually turn up. That isn't democracy, that's subservience. The TV media should decide the format, should decide when the TV debates are going to happen, and the party leaders can either turn up or be empty-chaired. And that should go double for Starmer, who appears to be the one dictating the terms to them right now. Right, so in a sign of perhaps how he fully intends to run the country, therefore, pretty much as he's running the Labour Party, Keir Starmer's been laying down the law on the format and type of TV debates he will attend to the television media, it would seem, rather than them giving party leaders a list of dates and saying show up or be empty-chaired. Right, so Starmer's Labour has been all over the place saying there will be television debates, and that Starmer himself has said he could debate Rishi Sunak 100 times for all the difference it would make. But the thing is, Starmer is only committing to debate Rishi Sunak head-to-head, and is flat refusing to debate smaller parties or do any more than 2 debates full stop, because they apparently take up too much time on the campaign trail. So what Starmer wants and seems set to get is 2 one-on-one debates with Rishi Sunak, as the BBC and ITV are reportedly scrabbling around to try and get an acceptable format that works for Starmer, so they secure the debates for their channels. Fundamentally, with the big poll lead Starmer has, the debates are, in Labour's view, theirs to lose. Sunak wants a debate every week, or so 6 debates therefore. Great on the face of it for us to get an insight into these leaders, what they stand for and how they respond to questions from audiences that they cannot prepare for. And again, having said that, you can see why Starmer would want to avoid such a thing. But Sunak wanting that, given his record he'd have to defend, does rather betray his own desperation right now and the desperate need to score a win over his Labour counterpart. Sunak is a dreadful public speaker. This isn't news to any of us, really. But Starmer is, in my opinion, actually worse. It should, in theory, be a doddle for Starmer to just be there, stand up, lay open Sunak's failures, 14 years of Tory failures, and hammer the Tories question after question, even if you have no discernible talent for public speaking yourself, and Starmer has very little. But of course, Starmer's ridiculous numbers of relaunches, outright list of lies and policy changes, usually just watering down or scrapping promises he never meant, meaning Labour's manifesto right now looks like it could fit on the back of a fag packet, means Sunak has got ample attack lines himself too. And the question of whether people can trust Starmer is going to be the factor that hurts Labour the most as this election campaign goes on. Fundamentally, if this is what we get by way of TV debates, just 2 lousy leaders bashing each other, offering you a choice between the 2 of them, analogous to which pair of dirty underwear from the laundry basket you want to wear today because there's none clean in the drawer. They are equally awful and standing on equally pathetic offers to the general public. If watching these 2 go head-to-head is all we have to look forward to, they won't be worth tuning into, frankly. Of course, the prospect of this is incredulous to the smaller parties, and these are the ones both Sunak and Starmer will both want to avoid, because both are fundamentally appealing to the same Tory voters themselves. Smaller party attacks on policy, from the left especially, which is pretty much where all smaller parties are now compared to the Tories and Starmer's Labour, shows why Starmer especially would want to dodge such questions and such parties. Even the Lib Dems faced the cut, and they were literally part of the government until 2015. The SNP, having been shafted horribly in Parliament in recent months, are the 3rd largest party, and yet they are treated as being irrelevant, and despite people getting out and voting for other smaller parties like the Greens, like the Workers' Party, the public now faces being denied hearing from them and challenging the bigger party leaders because Starmer functionally just doesn't want to. If he is so scared to debate all parties, then we again are reminded that we don't really live in a functioning democracy, just the illusion of one. We should have the maximum choice, maximum offers on show. And if Starmer doesn't wish to attend a given show because he's afraid Carla Denyer of the Greens or Stephen Flynn, the SNP Westminster leader, might put him in an awkward position or say something mean to him, what does that really say about him? Sunak is desperate enough to agree to anything right now, I would imagine. Starmer should face accusations of being too afraid of smaller parties to defend his own record and stance, and should be rightly rinsed for that if such debates go ahead. I would hope they finish, in which case, these head-to-heads with no winners, just two losers on screen. That said, for as much as ITV might be able to get away with such a Starmer-favouring layout, the BBC is less able to do so, given it is publicly funded. Legally, Ofcom ruled ages ago that formats for political debates are within the remit of the broadcasters themselves, but when they are acquiescing to the politicians, it doesn't in effect work out that way. However, the Beeb can avoid legal wrangles technically by offering an alternative debate between the smaller parties. However, this also comes with issues, since any attempts to attack the Tories or Labour made by any of these parties could be cut off by the presenter theoretically with the old adage, well, they aren't here to defend themselves. Well, hang on a moment, that would be their fault then. I think in fairness to the smaller parties, offers to Labour and the Tories to join such debates should be made as well, so that if they do not turn up, that would be by their own design, their own choice, and criticism of both these parties by the smaller ones should then be perfectly permissible. Sunak in his desperation might show up to such a debate, catching Starmer completely off balance. He is desperate enough to do that, I fancy, or at least send a party MP in his stead. But they would likely just become a target for the other smaller parties, in which case that could backfire. Fundamentally, though, it still isn't a good enough offer. Other channels, of course, should only two head-to-head debates go ahead, will also miss out completely, though. Channel 4, Sky, even GB News, GBBs, they wanted a crack as well. They could certainly entertain the smaller parties and give them more airtime than Starmer is choosing to take. I would absolutely go down that road if I were them. Opt to empty chair the two main party leaders, or two main parties at least, if they decide to avoid, as Sunak possibly would, and Starmer certainly would. And wouldn't it be just desserts to both main parties who, in their fear of being held to account, end up handing more airtime in this election campaign to smaller rivals than they end up taking for themselves? At the end of the day, there is only one reason the main two parties, the Tories and Labour, want a head-to-head, and it is to do with forcing people, us, the voting public, to pick between them and ignore everyone else. It itself is a consequence of first past the post. Only one of these two parties, their leaders, will govern the country. So pick between them and stop wasting your time with other options. It is all about convincing you to do that, and thereby hand a majority to one of these parties or the other, and change nothing in how the country is run, given their offers to the country are virtually identical, all run for the benefit of the wealthy, the donors, the establishment, and again another 5 years of the country never being run in our interests. We need to deny both of these parties of a majority. So the shows that would be far more interesting to me, by far, will be one involving those smaller parties. If they end up having to put up with a separate debate because they aren't good enough for the likes of Starmer, then we as voters who are looking at them aren't good enough for their parties either. So why should we give them their votes? That show, those smaller parties, I would hope wins the best ratings as a result, because it will be by far the most interesting to debate. Send a message to the broadcasters, and we don't like these stitch-ups designed to keep things unchanged. We don't like them listening to the powers that be rather than us who fund them by silencing the parties standing for a change. What we actually need implemented is something other countries have in relation to DV debates, and that is a specific organisation that oversees televised election debates, removes all the wranglings and the negotiations between political parties and mainstream broadcasters, and implements themselves how they will be run, who will be broadcasting what and when, and remove the power from the politicians for the sake of the public being able to see enough of them and fairly hold them all accountable equally. It will remain their choice if they show up or not. The empty chair is a fair and reasonable device. If you want to run the country and represent the people in it, then answer to them. Don't hide away. If you choose to run away, then not only are you not a Democrat, but clearly you have something to hide, are not trustworthy, and should not be someone we should at all be interested in voting to elect. Keir Starmer is running away from scrutiny by us, and the broadcasters look set to let him for no other reason than he thinks he can get away with it, and they desperately want him on. And his is a record he knows is indefensible now. Even before he's even gained power, it's already indefensible, and he already disgusts so many of us. Anything he therefore is saying or pledging or promising in his manifesto or out on the campaign trail, therefore, that he cannot be held to account by us over, cannot be trusted. That's been his legacy so far. If he isn't prepared to stand up and be tested on his own positions, on his own stances, does that not tell you something? Fundamentally, we do not have to vote Labour anyway if you also want to get the Tories out, which I imagine the vast majority of us want to do right now, and there's a very, very good reason for that, which the tactical voting mouthpieces don't want you to know about, but which you really ought to consider, and I happen to have explained it all in this video recommendation here, so do check that out next and stick with the channel, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.